Tonight we want to talk about liberty. Liberty is something we all have, and it's something that is imparted to us from our Father in heaven. Yet sometimes we aren't able to fully enjoy our liberty because others want to steal it from us. And then it becomes a lot more difficult. It's wonderful to live in a land that acknowledges and honors liberty. I live in the United States of America. Recently, there's been talk about America. Is it somehow exceptional? And many people say that it's not any more exceptional than any other country. That may be true today. If it is true today, it was not always true. Something that is very exceptional about America, the United States, is that it was formed on the basis of true liberty. Now, after some 240 years, we live in the time when we are seeing that liberty being undermined and soon to be destroyed. It's been betrayed. Let's look a little bit about that. This is Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called the birthplace of American liberty. And indeed, it goes back a long time. The Declaration of Independence was adopted there on July 4th of 1776. It's said that the design of the American flag was agreed upon there at Independence Hall. The Articles of Confederation were adopted there in 1781, and the Constitution of the United States was drafted and signed there at Independence Hall in 1787. At Independence Hall, we find the Liberty Bell. This bell was ordered in 1751, before the United States was a country, by the Pennsylvania Assembly for use in the Pennsylvania State House. It's called the Liberty Bell because it proclaims liberty. It's from Leviticus 25:10. Inscribed on the bell, it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Now realize those people, those first Americans, did not invent liberty. When they wrote the Declaration of Independence there in Independence Hall, and then when they followed that up with the Constitution of the United States, they were not inventing something new. They were inspired by the liberty found in the Scriptures. This was something new in the world. You know, the world has been dark with tyranny for millennia. People, for the most part, have not been able to enjoy freedom through most of human history. So, this verse in Leviticus proclaiming liberty for all the inhabitants was a radical idea. And realize that idea was in the scriptures almost 4,000 years ago. There was only one free people in the whole world. That was the people of Yahweh, the people of Israel. The rest of the world was dark with tyranny. There can be no liberty. There can be no freedom apart from our Creator and His precious, precious Word. And great Americans have known that and relied upon it from the beginning of this country. And that had a lot to do with shaping the freedoms that those first Americans enjoyed and that are crystallized in the Constitution of the United States. For instance, imagine this: the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, he said this: "The Bible is the best of all books, for it is the Word of God and teaches us the way to be happy in this world and in the next. Continue, therefore, to read it and to regulate your life by its precepts." Can you imagine having a Chief Justice of the United States telling Americans to base their lives on the Bible? That idea seems so strange today, but it was not strange for the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. This is what the first Americans believed. Or how about Andrew Jackson, President of the United States? He said the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. Are you starting to see what was unique about the United States of America? The freedom embodied in the Constitution of the United States comes directly from the pages of the Scriptures. How about James Madison, one of the framers of the Constitution? Listen to this: "We have staked the whole future of our new nation not upon the power of government, far from it. We have staked the future of all our political constitutions upon the capacity of each of ourselves to govern ourselves according to the moral principles of the 10 Commandments." Isn't that amazing? President Thomas Jefferson is quoted as saying this, as inscribed at the Jefferson Memorial: "God, who gave us life, gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that His justice cannot sleep forever." We have a legal doctrine in America that was used through part of the 20th century and is used today. called separation of church and state. And this legal doctrine has been put forth to say that the Bible and the teachings of the Bible are not involved in the governing principles of the United States. But when we actually look at what the founding fathers of the country said, when we actually look at the documents, what we find is that if you remove the scriptures from the Constitution of the United States, you have gutted liberty out of this country. That's what Thomas Jefferson was saying. Why is that true? Well, today we really have two paradigms. We have the paradigm that was the cornerstone of American liberty. It was the belief from the scriptures that man is created in the image of his creator, with the capacities and the abilities and the freedoms given to him by his creator, called in the Constitution unalienable rights. Freedom. In that Constitution, it says that all men are created equal. And of course, the very word created tells you it's talking about a creator that has given us these rights. So according to the Constitution of the United States, a completely unique document among the family of mankind today. The rights that we enjoy, the freedom, the liberty embodied in the Constitution does not come from the Constitution. It does not come from the government. It comes from our Creator. And therefore, not even the government has a right to take that liberty from us. By contrast, in the 20th century, a new paradigm arose. It's the paradigm of evolution. According to that paradigm, man is really just another animal. Man does not have a creator. Man came about by chance. And we have advanced along the path of evolution through survival of the fittest. In other words, the fiercest, most ruthless creature is the one that survived. Yet somehow we arrived at this idea of having human rights. Now, those two ideas are really opposite ideas. If you're just an animal, like every other animal, how do you have some special rights? And I'm telling you, that's where this is going. Eventually, we're all going to think just like Buddhists who believe that a fly has just as much rights as a human being. That's what comes out of the idea of evolution. However, survival of the fittest implies that the elite have the right to rule because they are the most fit, they have the most power, they have the most resources, so therefore they should rule over the rest of us. That is the real message of evolution. That is the message of despotism, totalitarianism, that is at work in our world, that is trying to push out freedom, that is trying to take away liberty from the God-given rights of individuals, replace them with something called human rights, which are granted by the state and which can be taken away just as quickly. This is where we are at. This is the shell game that is being done right now to steal our God-given rights from us and to substitute it with something like the porridge that was given to Esau. I am not buying that. This is the law of the jungle, where the strongest dominate. This is what is truly dominating the world today. And this is what is threatening liberty. And what has come out of this paradigm? $50 million abortions since abortion was legalized by the Supreme Court of the United States. Survival of the fittest, right? Bible reading and recitation of the Lord's Prayer in school has long since been ruled unconstitutional. Now, how is that possible when you read the things that the forefathers actually said about the Bible, where the first Supreme Court justice told us to read it every day, but you can't read it in school? And then, of course, we've seen in courthouses all across the United States the 10 Commandments, which one of our first presidents told us is the foundation of our behavior in this country. Those 10 Commandments have been removed from the courthouses in America. And as if all of that is not enough, recently, a year ago, the Supreme Court said that behavior, which is condemned in the Scriptures, which has been known to be evil since the beginning of time, is now a human right that we all must observe. So we are in a country where license to offend God is considered liberty, but it is not liberty, it is sin. With all of this having happened in this country, what is to become of liberty? Where there is no God, there can be no liberty. Where there are no scriptures, there can be no foundation for true liberty. So liberty is in danger very soon, being totally stamped out of this country. Well, you might say, that's not true because we're a democracy. But if you knew your American history, you would know that this country was not founded to be a democracy. It was founded to be a republic where certain things were held to be true by every person, things that could not be voted upon, like the 10 Commandments. But since around the middle of the 20th century, we have heard this more and more, that America is defending democracy in the world. And many of us have come to think that's a good thing. And to the extent that it protects freedom, it's better than totalitarianism. But Thomas Jefferson and the other founders specifically rejected democracy. And why did they do that? Thomas Jefferson said a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49%. You see, as the population sinks more and more into degradation and moral decay, democracy will drag the country down more and more toward chaos and misery. Now, this is not new. Plato actually talked about democracy. He said, dictatorship naturally arises out of democracy, and the most aggravated form of tyranny and slavery out of the most extreme liberty. A study of history will show you wherever democracy has been practiced, it has always sunk into totalitarianism. Every time. And it's happening again. We have this example of democracy. 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. You know, it's funny, except as we see this come about in this country, it's not going to be funny for Bible believers. Without the Bible as the divine standard to govern society, right and wrong are decided by the majority. And you know, the scriptures tell us the majority are always wrong. So where can that lead us? We, friends, are really in trouble in America. And I bring this up talking to our global audience because the downfall of freedom in America is going to mean the downfall of freedom in all the rest of the world. And so this is deadly serious to us all. Now, lately, people have seen this coming. Not everybody, but some people have been awake to what is going on. And they have started to try to take action to preserve liberty. For example, the recent Brexit vote of Britain to exit the European Union. This was a move to try and retain more personal liberty in Britain. Of course, in Europe and in America, there are political movements now that are seeking to conserve what liberty we have and even to try and turn things back around. This is not favored by the elite. For example, in this particular article, one of the elite, James Traub, has an article entitled, "It's Time for the Elites to Rise Up Against the Ignorant Masses." That's telling you what they really think about you, friends. You're just the ignorant masses. And he sees the solution to this move towards more liberty as the establishment political parties combining forces to keep out the nationalists. So there is a war right now between specifically Bible-believing people who believe in liberty that is rooted in the scriptures and the elite that see you as part of the ignorant masses that they want to control for their own benefit. They have resources. And trust me, they have an arsenal to fight against the light of liberty in the world. Now, I have a video about this, and I want to share it.
And again, the establishment, which now hates democracy, viscerally hates democracy, wants to use the EU as a model for spreading effectively dictatorship worldwide. At the moment, according to the House of Commons Library, which has just done a survey, 3 laws in 5 that are made for us by our parliament in the United Kingdom are in fact only made because Brussels says we must make those laws. Wow. These laws are being enacted because the European Union's commissars, 28 unelected people who meet behind closed doors, have issued what is revealingly called a directive, which we are then obliged, under pain of unlimited and continuing fines, to enact into law in the United Kingdom. That is how far from democracy we are. Now, you may say, oh, but I've heard of a thing called the European Parliament. Well, don't imagine that that is anything like a parliament. It is a fig leaf to cover the naked dictatorship behind. And this parliament cannot even bring forward a bill. Can you imagine if the United States had set up a constitution whereby the Congress was not allowed in either house ever to bring forward any new legislation? Yet the Constitution of Europe is that the supreme law of Europe is proposed behind closed doors by the 28 commissars, is drafted behind closed doors by a committee called the Council of Ministers, which doesn't actually have any ministers on it. It's entirely bureaucrats. There's also a rather shadowy group called the Council of Permanent Representatives, another lot of bureaucrats that have their say. Then and only then it goes to the European Parliament. And of course, if right at the outset the commissars have decided to veto whatever law it was, then the European Parliament doesn't get its say at all. So this is an entirely anti-democratic constitution. In fact, it's very like the Soviet constitution on which it was modeled. And all that's happened is the Soviet constitution has moved westward, and we are now effectively the European Supreme Soviet. And it is dragging all of us down with exactly this kind of bureaucratic mishmash of controls and regulations run by people we can't elect and can't remove that you talk of in the transatlantic trade partnership system. And what is happening here is that people like Mr. Obama, who have realized that communism is no longer popular, but who want to build in perma-communism into whatever they do, have discovered that if they make international treaties, either bilateral or multilateral, it doesn't very much matter, under your constitution, those treaties have the force of supreme law in the United States. And they can't be repealed unilaterally as your own laws can. That's the difference. And what is more, all the powers that are transferred, whether it be to the Transatlantic Trade Partnership, whether it be to the European Stability Pact, the European Union, the World Bank, the World Law of the Sea Conference, it doesn't matter which of these entities it is, the UN is another one. There are a growing number of them, all of them very expensive. Not one of these supranational or global bodies has its governing council elected by us, the people of the states parties to the treaties that set those bodies up. So every time you transfer power from elected hands in the democracies to a global or supranational organization, you're transferring it from elected to unelected hands every time. So every time somebody says, oh, we've got a new wonderful treaty, you will know with a terrible certainty that another large piece of your democracy has been sliced away like a piece of salami. And this is the intention of the left now, is to govern entirely by dictatorship. And so far has it gone that, to give you an example, which is being mirrored in the Transatlantic Trade Partnership, which is why I mention it to you in America too, is that the European Stability Pact, to which Britain doesn't belong because we're not part of the failing euro currency zone. But the regulations, that the treaty that sets up that pact, creates a governing council which can, at will, whenever it likes, call upon any of the member states of that group, the European Stability Pact, for unlimited amounts of money. And what is more, the people who are on this governing council, who are of course elected by nobody, they're so unaccountable that even if they decided to take the money and run off with it and put it into their bank accounts in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland or Belgium, which is now becoming one of the biggest money laundering centers in the world, then the Stability Pact terms say that those people cannot be prosecuted and they cannot be sued in any civil court either. They are completely immune. They have absolute financial power over all the countries that belong to that treaty, absolute power. And even if they choose to exercise that power criminally, nobody can do anything to stop them.
There's so much in that little clip. And the truth is, it's all true. And what it shows us is how right Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers in America were to decide that America would not be a democracy. Because a democracy is so easy for the elite to undermine and take over. Basically, that's what you see in the European Union. They have a veneer that looks like democracy, something called a parliament that has absolutely no power whatsoever. And all the people that are running the EU are behind the scenes. You don't even know their names. They are the elite. And they are the ones that are controlling Europe and a good part of the rest of the world. And this is considered a model for the UN, for the coming one world government. As a matter of fact, you would think with Britain voting to leave the EU, other countries in Europe also having similar movements coming up, that the EU now would be saying, oh, we're going to reform, we're going to become more open and transparent, we're going to listen to the people. No, that's not what's happening. What they're talking about now is crystallizing the EU even more into a super state, like the Soviet Union. And along with that, they want their own army, one army controlled by all of the EU. It is a nightmare. Lord Monckton mentioned about the power of international trade agreements. These international trade agreements are being used by the globalist elite to entrap countries of the world into the global governance scheme. And America is well along down this line. One of the important things that Lord Monckton mentioned, which is true, is that all nations, including the United States, that enter into international treaties, those treaties then have a status above the law within the country. And this is very dire for people who love freedom because they don't get to say anything about it. Those treaties get made. In many cases, they never even know what's in them, and they totally change the lives of people who are involved in those treaties. They advance the globalist agenda, and they steal freedom. Now, let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. We often hear from Donald Trump. He talks about trade a lot and globalization and how free trade is a job killer and steals jobs away from America. Maybe you've heard some of this. Maybe you've seen it on TV. But this is exactly what has happened. 20 years ago, NAFTA was enacted into law. It is a trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And what has it led to in those 20 years? A staggering $188 billion trade deficit for the United States. the loss of at least 1 million jobs that have left the United States, most of which have gone to Mexico. So it has meant income inequality, displacement for many Americans, and of course, a huge amount of immigration from Mexico into America. Well, has this been good for the people of America? Whole manufacturing sectors in America have been shut down by NAFTA. However, we see the leaders of these countries continuing to push NAFTA. For instance, just recently, the Mexican president urged North American integration. That was his response to the British exiting the EU. He's saying the United States, Canada, and Mexico must become like the EU. This, of course, has been a globalist plan for some time. This is called the North American Union. You know, it used to be, when people would talk about this, that they would be called conspiracy theorists. Now, it's right in Yahoo News, coming from the lips of the president of Mexico. Recently, the presidents of the three countries met in Canada. And this article tells us North America leaders mount strong defense of trade despite threats. The threats it's talking about are the threat that Donald Trump might try to reverse NAFTA. And the important thing here, President Obama said this: the integration of national economies into a global economy, that's here, that's done. Obama told a news conference at the end of a summit dubbed the Three Amigos. Let that sink in. The integration of national economies into a global economy is here, it's done. You see, this is how far globalism has progressed. On this level of trade, there already is one world government. And it's structured through the use of all of these treaties. Here's a map I found of this on Wikipedia. Global economic integration via multilateral treaties. Well, you might wonder, okay, but these are trade treaties. How can these take our liberty away from us? Well, a lot of our liberty depends on economic factors. So that's one reason. But here, where the three amigos were talking together, we noticed on the screen, leaders agree on environmental pact, LGBTQ rights. Now, they're supposed to be talking about trade agreements, but they're talking about an environmental pact and LGBTQ rights. Why is that? It's because if it's an international treaty, then it's binding on the United States without anybody voting on it. This is why in America we are having a lot of weird stuff that is being pushed down our throats. And it's being disguised as if somehow it arises from American law. But it is, in fact, entirely alien to American law. It's being pushed down our throats in the same way that EU law is pushed down the throats of the United Kingdom because of international treaties. Things that shouldn't be in trade treaties, such as things having to do with morals and human rights, are being included in those treaties to make them binding upon Americans and people of other countries. This is what is actually happening. This is how the globalist government is even right now being imposed upon America, and how our liberties are being betrayed by our leaders of this country, traitors to the Constitution of the United States of America and everything that this country was founded upon. If you don't believe me, look at this. This is put out by the United Nations, entitled The World Trade Organization and Global Governance. The booklet basically explains how to use trade to govern the world. They are way farther ahead on all of this than the average American could even imagine. A few people understand it. You see here a protester. Free trade is corporate tyranny. And of course, that's what's behind it all, isn't it? The big money, the elite, taking over the world. The man behind the curtain that you don't see, controlling our elected leaders and stealing our liberty. Here's a new organization, relatively new, GIFTA. Transformations in Global Governance, Integration via Free Trade Agreements. You get it? It's a conspiracy. It really is. A conspiracy to integrate the nations of the world without you or I even seeing what's really going on, thinking that our nation is not being changed where we live, and actually all the while we're being tied into this one world government, and the noose is being tightened tighter and tighter as our liberties are being stolen from us. What is happening is a lot like the Wizard of Oz. Remember that big scary wizard? What happened when little Toto pulled back the curtain? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We found out there was just a fallible human being who was doing it all. Very similar to what President Obama recently said. They'll warn that tyranny is always lurking just around the corner. You should reject those voices. Pay no attention to those people stealing your liberty. So who is it behind the curtain? Well, if we want to put a face on it, and it's not just one man, it's the globalists, but you could put the face on it of George Soros. And so we want to talk about him. He gave $1 million to Barack Obama's super PAC. Not a lot of money for him because he's a super billionaire. But nevertheless, certainly enough for President Obama to owe him. And not only did he give money directly to Obama's election, but also he backed the progressive agenda of the Democratic Party with $159 million. Think about that a minute. $159 million. That's a lot of money to spread around Washington, isn't it? Agenda supporters were linked to at least $159 million in donations or political contributions from wealthy backer George Soros for the new far-left progressive agenda. You wonder why things are changing so rapidly in America? Do you think all of this money could have anything to do with it? The Blaze kind of represented it like this. Who's really in charge? Well, it's not just President Obama that has received this money. Hillary Clinton has received at least $8 million, not to mention PACs supporting her election, much more money, and realized that Soros is tied into a whole network of people like him, whom he directs their money into all of this too. So what we're seeing is the march of Hillary. It doesn't matter how many scandals there are. It doesn't matter even if she's responsible for giving away secrets of the United States. None of that matters because she has the support of the elite. And even where anybody who reads the law and listens to the statement of the FBI director, James Comey, would come to the reasonable conclusion that she broke the law, she was given a pass. It says in the National Review, in essence, in order to give Mrs. Clinton a pass, the FBI rewrote the statute, inserting an intent element that Congress did not require. How is that possible? It certainly isn't possible because our country is governed equally by a rule of law. That would not be possible. As Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, said, it defies explanation, and damage is being done to the rule of law. A common response of the people is, why should I obey the law if our leaders don't have to? So this is how it is in America today. Let me tell you something, liberty goes along very closely with justice. Where there is no justice, there is no liberty. And justice is gone. From the highest levels of America, it has been bought and paid for by the elite. Many people ask the question, how could Director Comey come to this illogical conclusion? Who would have enough power to actually be able to threaten him? There are parties that could. Well, if we want to know what is behind the growing unrest in the world that is threatening the liberty of the United States and people everywhere, all we really have to do is follow the money. And we will see that the liberty of this country is being sold out for the globalist agenda. Now, we've mentioned George Soros, the man behind the curtain. Here's some news reports about him. This was a rather amazing headline, don't you think? How George Soros single-handedly created the European refugee crisis. Has that affected unrest in the world? Has that increased terrorism? Has that brought death and destruction to many people in the world? The money of George Soros and his friends is behind that. And this article proves that. And it is his organization, Open Society Foundations, that funded all of this. As a matter of fact, one reporter found in 2015 at the Greek island of Lesbos, which I found interesting, the migrant handbooks in Arabic that were being handed out to the migrants, and they basically said, welcome to the EU. Now, this was not from the EU, this was from George Soros. basically showing them how they could get welfare, get all kinds of benefits by going into the EU, promoting the migration to Europe. Here's some more that article says. George Soros is almost certainly a catalyst for much of the geopolitical turmoil now occurring. He is intent on destroying national borders and creating a global governance structure with unlimited powers. Do you wonder why we have an open border on our southern border in America, even though terrorism is a major threat and concern? Do you think the fact that that's what George Soros wants could have anything to do with that? Soros sees himself as a missionary carrying out the globalist agenda. He uses his vast political connections to influence government policy and create crisis, both economic and social, to further this agenda. Basically, what happens with George Soros is he bets on the failure of not only companies, but also countries. And then he makes it happen. And then he gets super wealthy from it. So he is a parasite on the world. And he's spreading chaos around the world, getting rich on it, and stealing the liberty of the people and pushing the globalist agenda. Soros funded opposition groups during the so-called Arab Spring revolutions. Do you think people eking out a living in the countries of the Middle East could afford to travel into the big city centers and have demonstrations and challenge the government? Do you think that just happened by itself? That's what the media wanted people to believe, but it could only happen because this all got coked up with money from the globalists and a lot of training too, by the way, from globalist organizations. The Ukraine. Again, something we think, okay, that's just something that happened. No, this was all coked up by George Soros. Billionaire financier George Soros was behind the Ukrainian uprising. He himself admits it. And he applauds the uprising against the Ukrainian police. That's what you see over and over again in these countries where George Soros has been at work. Is he instigates groups within the countries against the police, the local police, to cause chaos and to overthrow those countries. He's figured it out. He knows. It's the local police officer that is really holding back the tide. It's the local police officer in every country that is actually dealing with the problems of that country on a personal basis with the people. If he can overturn the local police officer in any country, he can create revolution. And he's done it over and over again. What about Poland? What about Israel and the Palestinians? The fingerprints of George Soros are all over it. These are just some articles I was able to find. What is he doing that none of us know about? Chances are, if there is unrest, he's involved. He uses anarchy to unhinge liberty and to make himself super wealthy in the process and to create a globalist government. It's very interesting that in 2012, George Soros predicted class warfare in America. He said that it was likely for riots to occur in America that could bring a society where individual liberty is much more constrained. And that is what's going to happen, isn't it? As there's more chaos on the streets where police themselves feel under fire, what is going to happen to individual liberty? It will be more suppressed. That is what will happen. He knows it. And he told us in advance. How could he do that? He could do that because he's helped to pay the bill to make it happen. Ferguson, he funded those protests, $33 million. You know, that'll buy a lot of broken windows, a lot of Molotov cocktails, a lot of looting and destruction. His Open Society Foundation was behind much of that. The Baltimore riots, a product of the Soros machine. George Soros has been heavily involved in the social unrest and movement-wrecking activity that has taken place all across the United States in recent months. From Florida to Ferguson and now Baltimore, George Soros foundations have been involved. What he's been doing in America is the same thing he did in the Ukraine, the same thing he did in the Arab Spring and other countries around the world. Just as he sought to collapse those countries, he's seeking to do the same thing to the United States of America. And he's doing it with the blessing of the elite and even establishment figures whom he is funding. Politico magazine reported major donors consider funding Black Lives Matter. All of this was stoked up by George Soros. A meeting of super wealthy elites with leaders of the Black Lives Matter group. This happened last year in 2015. And they formed a club. These people, these wealthy people, they formed a club. Not only to give insane amounts of money to Black Lives Matter, but it says here, the club and some of its members also are considering ways to funnel support directly to scrappier local groups that have utilized confrontational tactics. Confrontational tactics is a more acceptable term for the word violence. Here's another one. Black Lives Matter, Ferguson activists were paid with Soros money to protest. So here we are, months later. Exactly when the country is outraged over the lack of justice and liberty in the case of Hillary Clinton. Thinking about that, thinking about what it means, we have this happen. The Black Power shooter shooting 12 police officers in Dallas, 5 of them killed. We're seeing attacks on police officers all over the country, following the pattern as to what has happened with George Soros and the globalists in other countries, where countries have been taken down. Just recently, this is the front page of the Drudge Report. It looks like war, doesn't it? Cops targeted across America Riot watch issued for Louisiana. Panthers target pigs. Hate group urges gangs to kill. Lynch to protesters, don't be discouraged. Now, isn't that amazing? Here's a representative of the current administration in the midst of all of this, basically telling the protesters, keep going with this. And Hillary Clinton calls on whites to change their ways, like she has a right to judge the citizens of America with the things she's done. So here we have unrest in America, and probably worse than that. And in the days leading up to this discussion, what has been going on? Protests. Violent protests. Not the kind of protests like Martin Luther King, that were non-violent protests, where he told the people not to be violent, and where they were protesting visible kinds of discrimination. No, in this case, it's indiscriminate. Officers murdered without even knowing who they are or what they've done. In this case, protesters using fireworks, throwing Molotov cocktails, causing destruction, so that hundreds had to be arrested in various places across the country. Let's not blame them. They're being used. They're being coked up. They're being lied to. And they only represent a small part of their community. Let's look at who's really causing this. These are the people we should be concerned with. George Soros and the elite who are cooking all of this up to steal the liberty away from the United States of America. I put together a little video about some of these events, which I want to share.
To use that in this type of situation.
Again, you'll have to ask the Dallas Police Department about that.
But do you see that kind of remaking any of the guidelines for that type
Dynamic situations in the one that you saw in Dallas are creative, and they have to be dealt with in a creative way.
What was your message to your...
I can't hear you.
What was your message to your officers this morning?
That's between myself and my officers.
There's a vigil coming up this Sunday at San Jacinto Plaza. Does the department have any special plans on...
I'm not revealing that information.
Are you aware of the vigil
Yes,
at San
we
Jacinto
are.
Plaza?
What do you have to say to people who will be protesting out there on Sunday, Black Lives Matter people? What do you have to say to them?
Black Lives Matter, as far as I'm concerned, is a radical hate group. And for that purpose alone, I think the leadership of this country needs to look a little bit harder at that particular group. The consequences of what we saw in Dallas is due to their efforts. Any other question?
Join us right now, somebody we call on at times like this, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark. Good morning to you, Sheriff.
Good morning.
What are the emotions that you feel waking up this morning, and where are we at in society? Are we experiencing a war on cops?
Yeah, thanks. You know, I said that now going on almost 2 years ago that war had been declared on the American police officer. Probably said it on your program after the two of New York's finest were gunned down in their cruiser by an individual who claimed to be making amends for Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Some people thought that that was a little over the top, and I said war had been declared. War had been declared, but the American police officer knows it has. This is just another ugly chapter in that war.
David, you're obviously looking at, as the sheriff of Milwaukee County, you're looking at these types of situations, a coordinated attack, clearly. Waiting on some sort of mass gathering, you know, coordinated, waiting on a mass gathering of individuals, waiting to gun down police. How can you prepare for something like that? And do you think that we're going to see more of these types of attacks?
Well, I would hope not, but you can't prepare for an ambush like that. We've seen law enforcement officers ambushed. One happened not too long ago in Houston. We were just filling up his cruiser with gasoline, and then, like I said, the ones in NYPD. Those aren't the only three, but you can't prepare for that ambush. I mean, we understand the dangers inherent in this sort of work, but when somebody's going to set you up to ambush you, there's really not much you can do.
Let me ask you this. What does it say, though, given the fact that one of the fella who was cornered and shot himself rather than being taken alive said the end is coming and he's going to try to hurt as many cops as he possibly can?
I don't know what you say to some stupid comment like that. He probably did society a benefit by ending it the way that he did. But going back to President Obama, it's kind of interesting that he said the facts aren't in. He usually is popping off at the mouth before he's been briefed or before he knows any of the facts. You know, like he did yesterday without any foundation. He talked about racism and disparate treatment and people of color, all this nonsense. Like I said, he's armed with powerful words, and he uses those words irresponsibly. It fuels this sort of anger toward the American police officer, and I wish he'd knock it off. Yesterday, what we got from President Obama was, and this is, you know, there's some aspects this is the right thing to do. He said, my thoughts and prayers are with the families of the two people who were caught in those tragic situations in Louisiana and Minnesota. But he says nothing today. He's waiting for facts to emerge. He says nothing about condolences, and he won't visit or call any of those families either.
Yeah.
What happened last night was the worst attack on law enforcement since September 11.
Yeah.
The people of Dallas should not feel guilty about it. It could have happened anyplace else in America. Police officers in this country feel they have a target on their back. And they felt that way for over a year now. Police officers Ramos and Liu, who were assassinated on purpose.
In New York City, yeah.
Yeah. And this man made his motives clear. He was killing them. I'm just reading from the police commissioner. He wanted to kill officers. And he expressed killing white people. He expressed killing white officers. He expressed anger for Black Lives Matter. None of that makes sense, said Chief Brown.
There's something bigger behind this. There is an agenda behind it. Here's something I added to my slides just before this presentation tonight from the Dallas Morning News. There was a viral post by the Fort Worth Police Officers Association that said Black Lives Matter kills cops. And among other things, the Dallas Morning News says this Police Officers Association posted as proof something from a Facebook listing from something called Black Lives Matter Dallas, Texas chapter. And it starts out saying, "Good morning. In lieu of last night's murders of the 5 Dallas, Texas officers, it is what is, justified." And it goes on to say that these killings were justified. Where is this all going to end up? Other countries where this has been done, where this has been incited, it has ended up in overturning those countries. It could be, and likely will be, the end of liberty in America. Here's the plan. It's been the plan for quite a long time. They've been working on it. Collapse America into the United Nations. Finally form that one world government out in the open. The United States, from its manner of inception, is different than the other countries of the world. Having been based on liberty from our Creator. To have a one world government, that's got to be done away with. And that's what this is all about. You know, when you look at the news and you see all of these things happening, you see things about trade, you see things about commerce, jobs leaving the country, the middle class shrinking, violent uprisings, people shooting police, and on and on. You wonder, what is this all about? Does this have any common thread? I shared with you what that common thread is in the Daniel seminar. The common thread is this push, this move towards a global government. This is now well underway. And this is why, for the elite, liberty must be destroyed in America. That will happen. I wish I could tell you that at this point in time, we could turn this around. Because it's heartbreaking to see these things happening. You know, just to see what happened with those officers who were shot in Dallas. Read the reports of their families. Read the reports of all the people that they helped who are heartbroken over this. Seeing all of this chaos across the country that's going to get worse and worse. It's heartbreaking to even think about the human cost of all of this, the misery that this is bringing about, and, of course, where this has to end up with the loss of liberty, what remains of it in America. So I don't want to say this is what's going to happen. I also know that there are many good people in America, fine people, God-fearing people, and we all need to pray for them. But the truth is, there are not enough. There are too many ignorant people in America who don't know their history, who haven't taken time to know what the truth is, who can easily be pawns of the elite and the push to globalism. We know what the times are from the scriptures. We know this is the final generation. And so we know from Bible prophecy that the plan is going to succeed. Where this is going to end up, according to the scriptures, is here. A one-world government without God, without liberty, can form or die. That's the world that is descending right now. What are we to do in the face of this impending threat? Friends, we have to be like those first Americans. We have to put our trust in our Creator. We have to believe in Him. We have to believe in His Word. We need more than ever before to conform our lives according to His thinking, according to what He says. We need to draw close to Him. We need to look at our priorities. We need to keep our families strong in Him. And as we see this growing unrest, it would be wise if we continue to become as free as we can be. Don't get yourself in unnecessary debt. Try to get free of debt. Get as close as you can to other like-minded believers because you're going to need one another as these things unfold. And get ready for the second Exodus because the nations of this world, the Gentile nations of this world, they're going to be left without anything of any reality to cling to. And Yeshua Messiah talked about it. He talked about the house built on the rock and the house built on the sand. What happened when the storm came? Well, just imagine a global government built on the sand. These nations, these Gentile nations, they're going to be shaken. And it's going to be no place you want to live. Prepare now, because escape is still possible in the remnant exodus. Our Father has promised us He will make a place of safety for His people. And there will be a second exodus, this time not just from one nation, but from all the Gentile nations. And all of those who belong to Him will be drawn together according to these same principles of liberty found in the Scriptures, with the Lord of Lords and King of Kings as our King. And He's even now working to pull us together, to draw us together, to make us ready. Pay attention to that in your heart. Speak to Him about it. Come up with your agenda of what you need to do to be ready. Ask Him about it. He's going to help you. This second Exodus is going to be a triumph of liberty. At the very time when liberty is being blotted out around the world, Yahweh is preparing a place of liberty and freedom and deliverance for His people. Friends, we don't have to be afraid of the things that are coming upon this world, because already our Father in heaven is working at making a place. Let's just put Him first. Let's do His will. And let's prepare ourselves for the remnant exodus. Thanks for listening.
The global economy is teetering. World affairs are in a shambles. Unprecedented changes are in the works. The biblical signs of the last days are indeed upon us, meaning that global disaster is imminent. Yet, escape is possible. That's what this Remnant Exodus seminar is all about. Escape. Explaining the threat, exposing the lies, and pointing out the only way of escape from the impending doom. This Remnant Exodus seminar includes 7 power-packed video presentations, each one about an hour to an hour and a half in length. These presentations are based on the Scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament, on current events, and on documented history. Each video builds on those before it. The Remnant Exodus seminar is designed to easily go through this information step by step with slides and illustrations to guide you each step of the way. Prepare for assumptions of the past to be challenged, giving you important new information to help guide your way. There are no gimmicks here, no manipulation, no lies. We know that your life is literally on the line. So documentation is provided for the facts in this presentation for you to check out for yourself. Consider all of the evidence, and then you be the judge. Here is a short outline of what's included in these videos. The first video is entitled Escape the Mark. The mark of the beast of Revelation is coming. You need to escape before that happens. Video 2 is entitled The War on Cash. We're quickly moving toward a cashless world. This will bring in the mark. Video number 3 is entitled, No Rapture, No Escape. The pre-trib rapture is a fatally flawed doctrine based on assumptions that do not agree with the facts of history. Find out how the facts about the early believers change everything you may have been told. A pre-trib rapture does not offer a way of escape. I would add that the history that is presented in this particular video is absolutely eye-opening and an entirely different paradigm than what you have ever heard. Video number 4 is entitled The Great Judaic Schism. The influence of rabbinical Judaism on the world has been far-reaching, more far-reaching, in fact, than most of us realize. Revisiting the history of first-century Judaic sects is eye-opening for Jews, Christians, and Messianics, since all three groups are directly affected by this information. Video 5 is entitled, The Christian Church Did Not Exist Before 135 AD. Yes, for hundreds of years, Christians have been told that the Christian church began at Pentecost, as allegedly reported in the book of Acts. Yet, based on easily proven facts, many Christian scholars know this is not true. The Christian church did not exist before 135 AD, a fact with huge ramifications when looking for a way of escape. Video 6 is entitled, Into Babylon. History clearly shows that both rabbinical Judaism and Christianity started on the path into Babylon in the 2nd century AD. This has set up people from both of these groups for disaster when Babylon the Great of Revelation 17 and 18 soon meets its end. Yes, this is a shocking claim. That's why you need to take in this seminar. The final video, video number 7, is entitled Remnant Exodus. The remnant is one of the most well-established teachings of Scripture, yet probably is also the most neglected. Here you will learn who the remnant are and how the remnant exodus offers the only way of escape. Perhaps most importantly, it will finally become clear how you can escape as part of this group. A seminar of this depth on any topic could normally cost you thousands. Yet, we are offering you the entire seminar from our website at absolutely no cost. All we ask is that you prayerfully, carefully, and systematically consider the entire seminar, and only after you have done that, make your judgment about it. In closing, realize that there are powerful enemies to the truths presented in this seminar, so we can't promise how long this free Remnant Exodus seminar will be here. We urge you to sign up for this Remnant Exodus seminar immediately while it is still available. That's what we've got. See you on the other side.
been able to enjoy freedom through most of human history. So, this verse in Leviticus proclaiming liberty for all the inhabitants was a radical idea. And realize that idea was in the scriptures almost 4,000 years ago. There was only one free people in the whole world. That was the people of Yahweh, the people of Israel. The rest of the world was dark with tyranny. There can be no liberty. There can be no freedom apart from our Creator and His precious, precious Word. And great Americans have known that and relied upon it from the beginning of this country. And that had a lot to do with shaping the freedoms that those first Americans enjoyed and that are crystallized in the Constitution of the United States. For instance, imagine this: the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, he said this: "The Bible is the best of all books, for it is the Word of God and teaches us the way to be happy in this world and in the next. Continue, therefore, to read it and to regulate your life by its precepts." Can you imagine having a Chief Justice of the United States telling Americans to base their lives on the Bible? That idea seems so strange today, but it was not strange for the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. This is what the first Americans believed. Or how about Andrew Jackson, President of the United States? He said the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. Are you starting to see what was unique about the United States of America? The freedom embodied in the Constitution of the United States comes directly from the pages of the Scriptures. How about James Madison, one of the framers of the Constitution? Listen to this: "We have staked the whole future of our new nation not upon the power of government, far from it. We have staked the future of all our political constitutions upon the capacity of each of ourselves to govern ourselves according to the moral principles of the 10 Commandments." Isn't that amazing? President Thomas Jefferson is quoted as saying this, as inscribed at the Jefferson Memorial: "God, who gave us life, gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that His justice cannot sleep forever." We have a legal doctrine in America that was used through part of the 20th century and is used today, called separation of church and state. And this legal doctrine has been put forth to say that the Bible and the teachings of the Bible are not involved in the governing principles of the United States. But when we actually look at what the founding fathers of the country said, when we actually look at the documents, what we find is that if you remove the scriptures from the Constitution of the United States, you have gutted liberty out of this country. That's what Thomas Jefferson was saying. Why is that true? Well, today we really have two paradigms. We have the paradigm that was the cornerstone of American liberty. It was the belief from the scriptures that man is created in the image of his creator, with the capacities and the abilities and the freedoms given to him by his creator, called in the Constitution unalienable rights. Freedom. In that Constitution, it says that all men are created equal. And of course, the very word created tells you it's talking about a creator that has given us these rights. So according to the Constitution of the United States, a completely unique document among the family of mankind today. The rights that we enjoy, the freedom, the liberty embodied in the Constitution does not come from the Constitution. It does not come from the government. It comes from our Creator. And therefore, not even the government has a right to take that liberty from us. By contrast, in the 20th century, a new paradigm arose. It's the paradigm of evolution. According to that paradigm, man is really just another animal. Man does not have a creator. Man came about by chance. And we have advanced along the path of evolution through survival of the fittest. In other words, the fiercest, most ruthless creature is the one that survived. Yet somehow we arrived at this idea of having human rights. Now, those two ideas are really opposite ideas. About that, this is Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called the birthplace of American liberty. And indeed, it goes back a long time. The Declaration of Independence was adopted there on July 4th of 1776. It's said that the design of the American flag was agreed upon there at Independence Hall. The Articles of Confederation were adopted there in 1781, and the Constitution of the United States was drafted and signed there at Independence Hall in 1787. At Independence Hall, we find the Liberty Bell. This bell was ordered in 1751 before the United States was a country by the Pennsylvania Assembly for use in the Pennsylvania State House. It's called the Liberty Bell because it proclaims liberty. It's from Leviticus 25:10. Inscribed on the bell, it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Now realize those people, those first Americans, did not invent liberty. When they wrote the Declaration of Independence there in Independence Hall, and then when they followed that up with the Constitution of the United States, they were not inventing something new. They were inspired by the liberty found in the Scriptures. This was something new in the world. You know, the world has been dark with tyranny for millennia. People, for the most part, have not Tonight we want to talk about liberty. Liberty is something we all have. And it's something that is imparted to us from our Father in heaven. Yet sometimes we aren't able to fully enjoy our liberty because others want to steal it from us. And then it becomes a lot more difficult. It's wonderful to live in a land that acknowledges and honors liberty. I live in the United States of America. Recently, there's been talk about America. Is it somehow exceptional? And many people say that it's not any more exceptional than any other country. That may be true today. If it is true today, it was not always true. Something that is very exceptional about America, the United States, is that it was formed on the basis of true liberty. Now, after some 240 years, we live in the time when we are seeing that liberty being undermined and soon to be destroyed. It's been betrayed. Let's look a little bit